This podcast replay is brought to you by Pallet Rack City, specializing in knockdown and installations of your warehouse equipment. They also sell used forklifts and dock equipment, largest used rack inventory in South Florida. You want a great rack? Call Eddie right now, 305-887-9212, Pallet Rack City.
College football, as we get to talk to Ryan Aber, who covers the Oklahoma Sooners for the Oklahoman. So we'll have a little fun with Ryan there. And listen, Jalen Hurts is one of those guys that a lot of people have been talking about. A lot of Dolphin fans have mentioned him to me. And I would say that he's one of those cats that is more of a project than anything else. That's kind of the way I would look at him, because I don't look at him as a pure pocket passer. And that's the problem for me, that if you're not going to be a pure pocket passer, then all of a sudden I've got to design the whole offense around you. And that's where I kind of stand with this kid, that he's not really, your typical pro-style quarterback. And are you going to run something more like what you do with Lamar with him? That's the real question. Do we have him?
We have Ryan for you, sir.
All right, I like it. Ryan Aber covers the Oklahoma Sooners for the Oklahoman. Let's bring him aboard. Ryan, how are you doing, my man? Is it pronounced Aber?
It is.
Okay.
I appreciate that. A lot of people don't get it right the first time, so I appreciate it, and doing well. Glad to be on with y'all.
Well, listen, I can understand, because obviously my name being Orlando Alzagari, that is not necessarily the kind of name that people get right the first time, second time, or third time. You know what I'm saying? So I can feel your pain, my man. I know when it's a different kind of name, it kind of throws people off there. All right, so Ryan, you've been covering this young man obviously from the first day he stepped onto the campus, and one of the things that, okay, from afar now because I'm not around him, but watching him from Alabama and then watching him at Oklahoma, how many guys have you been around that are so good at handling adversity and all kinds of different? Because he just seems to be, when it comes to leadership, it seems like that oozes out of him.
Yeah, there's some things you can pick on with this guy's game, but leadership and the way he handles difficult situations is certainly not one of them. He's been fantastic with the way that he handled everything that went down at Alabama, to have that level of success and then lose your starting job, and to deal with it the way that Jalen Hurts dealt with it, which was just to put his head down and get to work and work as long as he could before he made the decision to transfer, and then obviously handled everything phenomenally once he got to Oklahoma. So this guy's leadership and the way that he handles being around people and carrying them along to where he wants to be is absolutely phenomenal.
How do people respond to him, his teammates? Walk me through that vibe in the locker room, the connection between him and not just his offense, but maybe also his defensive players.
Yeah, I think I'll just start off with defense, just because there's a couple guys that really bonded with him right off the bat, and one of the biggest ones would be Kenneth Murray, the middle linebacker from Oklahoma, that is their best defensive player, or was for most of the year, and actually had a run-in with Jalen at in the Orange Bowl a year ago, and they started jawing at each other. But as soon as Jalen Hurts arrived on campus, he was this team's unquestioned leader, and I think a lot of that started because Kenneth Murray, who was already the leader of this defense, jumped aboard immediately, and that bond that they built was really special. And I also think the bond that Jalen Hurts had with Alex French, the other central figure in Oklahoma's success this year, turning their defense around, really went a long way toward endearing him to everybody else on this team.
Ryan Aber, of course, joining us. He covers the Oklahoma Sooners for the Oklahoman, and you can follow him on Twitter like I and so many others do at RYAber. Follow him there, and you can get the latest on what's going on with the Oklahoma Sooners. The game against LSU, in a way, I mean, even the Baylor game, they weren't either great performances against Baylor or against LSU. Why would you say that?
Well, I think certainly in the Baylor game, a big part of that was the turnovers and the ability to hold on to the football, to make the correct decisions were sometimes an issue with him this year. And we saw that not only in those couple of games, but at other points, especially in the last half of the season, that he struggled with making throws that put them in not a great position as far as turnovers go, and also at times got pretty fast and loose with the ball, as we saw with some of the fumbles that he had. I think he got better at that as the year went on, but still was a bit of an issue. And I think at the LSU game, a big part of that was just the fact that LSU was so good, and especially on the back end, Oklahoma was missing a couple pieces, although that certainly doesn't make up the gap that we saw in that game, that finished 63-28. But was certainly part of it, and Oklahoma really struggled to protect Jalen Hurts. And because of that, especially early, I thought Jalen Hurts got a little antsy in the pocket and at times made it seem like he had less time than he actually did.
What did you see different from him running the offense compared to Kyler Murray the 2 years before that?
Oh, I think it's I'm not going to say a completely different offense, but it's a lot different with Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield for that matter, versus Jalen Hurts. And they didn't throw the ball down the field quite as much this year as they've done in the past, even though they had CeeDee Lamb, who was really good on those deep balls. It was many more short throws, quick reads. But they also took advantage of Jalen Hurts' running ability a lot. Kyler Murray was fantastic running the ball, but most of his was sort of improvisational, where he just, when the play breaks down, he's able to break out and make plays with his feet and make big plays with his feet. This year, they got so much more deliberate with calling the run-pass options that wound up a lot of times being read as a Jalen Hurts carry. And he took advantage of that, was a fantastic runner. There's some questions about him at the next level as far as arm strength, as far as decision-making with regularity, like I mentioned earlier. But I thought this year was as much about Jalen Hurts' success, or as much about Lincoln Riley's innovation offensively and his ability to change with who he's got at quarterback, than about what Jalen Hurts was able to do, which was a lot. I think he was really good. It's just like I said, I think Lincoln Riley had a lot to do with that as well.
Ryan, how is he because you talked about not going deep as much, how accurate is he with that deep ball? Was that something that Lincoln didn't want to dial up as much because he didn't have that kind of confidence in it? And then part two, the ad-libbing that you talked about with Kyler Murray, he's still doing it at the NFL level. How is Jalen when everything breaks down and he's got ad-lib?
Yeah, I think Jalen much more just becomes a straightforward running back, where he's going to put his head down and sort of bull you to make yards. Now, how that works at the NFL when guys are a whole lot bigger, faster, stronger.
It doesn't work, bro. It doesn't work.
We'll see about that. Exactly. I think it takes a guy that's just with special kind of speed, like Kyler Murray, to make some of those things happen. So I think that becomes much more difficult. When you talk about his accuracy down the field, it's not what Baker Mayfield's or Kyler Murray's is. It was a whole lot better, though, than it was at Alabama. I think Jalen Hurts became a better thrower this year. I'm just not sure that that's enough to make him a game-after-game starter in the NFL.
Good stuff. Ryan Aber joining us here. And that's to me, that's where I've never been convinced with this kid, because he kind of seems like, see, the thing with Kyler is he's actually very accurate from the pocket. I don't know if you force Jalen into the pocket and take his legs away, how does that accuracy go? Does it go up or does it go down in your eyes?
Yeah, I think that would be really difficult. I think so much of what makes Jalen Hurts a great college quarterback is that running ability that you have to account for on defense, and that forces you to take some things away from your pass coverage that they can exploit, and certainly get exploited in what Lincoln Riley does offensively, whether it be in the running game with other guys, whether it be in just sort of the dump passing game to guys like CeeDee Lamb or the tight ends. I think it's difficult to see that particular set of his game translating at the next level, which means he's got to be a pocket passer. And as you mentioned, Kyler Murray, when he sits back in the pocket, he can be very accurate.
Yep.
Same thing with Baker Mayfield when he gets time, although this year I think he regressed in a pretty significant way. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does at the next level. But I think, to me, it's got to be an offense that really works well for him. I said this with Baker Mayfield, and of course he found that offense. Mm-hmm. But I think Jalen Hurts even more so would have to be just a perfect fit in the NFL for him to have long-term success.
You know, when you're talking about Baker, and one of the things he struggled this year was when they put pressure on him. How is Jalen? Because, see, that's the thing about, you know, Kyler, I got to give him credit, man. He's better than what I thought he was going to be at this level. I still worry about his size and taking shots and how that's going to hold up. But he's got that elusiveness, and he's got that quality that Lamar has, also Jackson. And that's not something that Jalen has. He's not elusive. And when it comes to ad-libbing, that's a problem for him. When it comes to passing, that's a problem for him. It's hard to see him because a lot of fans, Ryan, they're going to think that, oh, he's athletic, he can run. Well, they'll make him do the things that Kyler does. They'll make him do the things that Lamar does. He's really not those guys, right?
Yeah, he's not either of those kind of quarterbacks. I think, you know, we're talking about Kyler Murray. He's got world-class speed. I mean, he's, was right up there with Marquise Hollywood Brown as the fastest guys on that team last year. And, you know, we've seen what kind of speed that Marquise Brown has now that he's healthy. That's not Jalen Hurts. And like you said, it's a whole lot tougher to do that in the NFL. I think you saw, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, in that LSU game, sometimes he ducked out of pressure that wasn't there, where he had time to sit back in the pocket, stand tall, and make the throws. And sometimes he got antsy and got flushed out of the pocket, and it wound up him running for maybe a yard or two or getting brought down in the backfield. And if you do those things in the NFL, if you feel pressure that isn't there, it's going to be really, really hard to have much success at that level.
If he's not elite as a passer, if he's not elite in the pocket, he's not elite running either at the next level, because he's not going to be as elusive as those other guys. What kind of a system does he fit in your eyes at the next level? Because it almost sounds like he's probably more of a gimmick and an athlete than anything else, than a quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really difficult to find a really good fit for him, because I think you're going to have to find one where he's asked to make a lot of quick throws. He's got to have a good offensive line in front of him to give him some time and to give him confidence to sit in the pocket. Now, that's not to say that he can't become a better pocket passer, making the jump to the next level. I mean, we've seen the ability for this guy to work and change his game and things like that. But I think, to me, it's just got to be a perfect fit again. Was talking with a couple of OU beat guys the other day, talking about what would be best for him. You know, I hate to do this for a quarterback, and I think there's a chance that Jalen Hurts could find the right system and become a decent NFL quarterback. But
you're staying away. Wait a minute, you're staying away from being Bill Polian. Come on, admit it, Ryan. Let's go. You want to give me a Bill Polian-like comment? Shoot, baby. Go ahead. You can do it.
I mean, I think that it's going to be really difficult for him to have consistent success at the NFL at the quarterback position. I think he could be better served, or not better served. I think he would have a chance at having a longer NFL career at another position. But some guys just don't want to give up quarterback, and you can understand that. And like I said, if he makes the steps, maybe he could be a guy who played in the NFL for a significant amount of time. But I think it's going to be really difficult.
Baker Mayfield, so let me ask you something. When you see the struggles this year, because he kind of was able to live off of play action last year, and I thought Freddie Kitchens actually didn't establish Chubb in the running game enough to help out Baker this year with that play action. But they've got him like the one-read guy now, and that's kind of been what's been exposed, and they also know where he likes to roll to and what side. So you tell me, after watching Baker there and now watching Baker 1 year to the next, and the NFL kind of figure him out, what's his next step for you?
Well, I think he's got to adjust to those things. He's got to be more unpredictable at where he rolls out of. He's got to be better at just sitting there in the pocket without the play action and making plays downfield and be more consistent. I think the NFL's adjusted to him. It's his turn to adjust back, and we'll see how that works. I still think, if you ask me, the three quarterbacks that we're talking about at OU here, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, if you ask me which one is going to be more successful in the NFL long term, right now it's hard to argue against Kyler Murray the way that he's performed. And I think it's going to be more difficult for teams to adjust to what he's able to do than it has been with Baker Mayfield, and then it will be with Jalen Hurts.
I'm with you 100% there. And let me tell you, Kyler Murray's kind of won me over a little bit as a player. I still worry about him physically, right, Ryan? That's the one thing that I do worry, that if he does take a couple of shots, I don't know how he's going to be able to react, because I know he's kind of thick for a small guy, but he's still small for the NFL, which is still pretty amazing. And let me tell you, were you amazed that he was able to kind of stay healthy all year also?
I was a little bit, but, I mean, that's just who Kyler Murray is. Like I said, his speed, his elusiveness, I've never seen anybody who is able to avoid contact quite the way that Kyler Murray does. And it's easy to say, oh, he's a baseball player, he knows how to slide. But it's much more than that.
Oh, yeah.
The way that he's able to avoid taking big hits. Now, eventually he's going to take some big hits in the NFL that are going to, put him in bad positions. But I think as long as he maintains the kind of speed he has right now, that he's got a chance to hang around this league for a while.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. You can follow Ryan, by the way, on Twitter at RYAber and catch his work there at the Oklahoman covering the Sooners. And by the way, Ryan, just tell Lincoln to go recruit some defensive players, please. Just a few, dude. Come on. You've got the offense thing down, Pat. Let's get that entire conference up to recruiting some defensive players so they can compete for a national championship, man. It's got to be frustrating for Big 12 fans, right? It's like, man, our offenses are awesome, but we can't stop anybody, and it burns us every time.
Yeah, they're trying to get better about that. I think the class that they just signed here in December has a higher level of talent on the defensive side. Alex Grinch only had one of his signees on this team this year. That'll change pretty significantly next year. They had a really short secondary. Parnell Motley at 6'0" was their tallest defensive back most of the year until in that Peach Bowl when Woody Washington, a freshman, got thrown out there sort of prematurely because of a targeting ejection. So they feel like they're making strides on that side of the ball, but it's going to be interesting to see how much different that defense looks last year with Alex Grinch and having much more of his players than it did this year. When it was better, it just wasn't, as we saw in the Peach Bowl, at the level needed to compete for a national championship.
Yeah. I don't think you're as old as I am, but dude, I'm 53. I'm old enough to remember when like Oklahoma had like badass defensive players. Okay. I mean, NFL-like defensive studs on those teams. Yeah. I mean, all they got to do is find a couple, and they're competing for a national championship. I mean, legitimately competing, because most of us now, when we see a Big 12 team get into the playoffs, it's like, okay, they stand no shot. It's hard to ever pick a Big 12 team because none of them play defense yet.
Yeah, I think I grew up in Oklahoma City in the mid-'80s. I'm actually 42 years old now.
There you
go.
To
make sure I was giving you the right answer. So I grew up watching, guys like Brian Bosworth and Ricky Dixon play defense for the Sooners. And then later, obviously, especially early in the Bob Stoops era, with guys like Teddy Lehman and Dusty Dvorak and Tommy Harris and those kind of guys, Gerald McCoy. It's been a while since they've had that big difference maker on defense, especially in the front seven. And I think Kenneth Murray was a little bit better at that in the middle of the linebacker spot this year, but they've got to get to where they've got 3 or 4 or 5 of those guys on defense to really feel like that they can compete once they get to bowl season. And like I said, I think they feel like they're a whole lot closer to that now than they were 11 months ago when Alex Grinch arrived. But they've still got to keep making strides in order to get better on that side of the ball and be able to compete with the LSUs, the Ohio States, the Clemsons of the world.
Ryan, can you explain how it all changed? Because it's not a lack of resources. Because we know Oklahoma's a freaking great university and they've got every resource possible. So we know when recruits walk in there, they've got to be I've seen Lincoln Riley's office, dude. I want to live in that thing. Are you kidding me? It's one of the greatest offices in the history of the planet. Okay, so it's not a sexy place to go. They can get great offensive players. What was the watershed moment? Where was it that they all of a sudden decided, well, we're only going to be great on offense? That's the part I don't understand about whatever, Oklahoma, Nebraska, all these teams that I used to remember when I was young. They had plenty of great defensive players.
Yeah, I think a big part of it was first of all, when Mike Stoops left and went to Arizona the first time, and then he came back, they were never able to recapture that. They stopped being able to get big-time defensive linemen, and it really got harder as the league started becoming much more of an offensive league. People started thinking of the Big 12 as, sort of this place where people went to play video game football, and all of the big-time, 4- and 5-star defensive linemen especially started all going to the SEC instead of even thinking about the Big 12. And, OU's defensive recruiting, they've missed on a lot of people, and that's obvious given where they've stood in the Big 12 up until this year over the last 3 or 4 years. But also it's become much more difficult for any team in this conference to recruit at a championship type of level on the defensive side. They think they got better there, especially on defensive line this year, by signing a couple JUCO guys that they're hoping can, 1, be immediate contributors up there, and 2, can start showing young defensive line recruits that you can have success in the Big 12. And I think this conference is shifting back a little bit toward the defensive side, but it'll be interesting to see how that looks recruiting-wise, not only in this 2020 cycle, but 2021 and 2022, as they try to build the core of a defense that they feel like can compete.
Ryan Aber from the Oklahoman joining us here, talking a little Oklahoma football. Ryan, thank you for taking some time, my man. Great insight. Really appreciate it, my brother. Hope to do it again down the line.
Sounds great. Really enjoyed it, and really thanks for having me on. Have a great New Year's.
Thank you, my brother. Appreciate it. Happy New Year, Ryan. Thank you. There you go. Good stuff from Ryan Aber, man.